News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukutali.
And top of the morning to you. This is Newsline, live as always from the Newsfirst studios in Dorset Street in Colombo. We posed a question this morning. The declaration of assets and liabilities by members of parliament, by the famous seven, is it a publicity stunt, or is it the beginning, the start of a real commitment to transparency by our elected and appointed legislators? Let's find out. We've got one of the famous seven with us this morning, Mr. Tharaka Faraz, Member of Parliament from the Kegal district for the UPFA. Very good morning to you, Mr. Balasuri. Thank you very much for being on the program. So let's pose the question straight away. The declaration, public declaration of your, or the release publicly of your assets and liabilities, is it a publicity stunt, or is it a commitment to more transparency by our legislators, by our parliamentarians?
Well, Faraz, thank you for having me in the show. First of all, I think, you know, from my I never had any intention of making it a publicity stunt, although certain politicians or certain people might see it that way. I think, you know, one of the issues with the asset declaration is that although the assets and liabilities we declare it every year to Parliament, and in the case of ministers, they declare it to the President. The issue is no one can publicize them, as you correctly said. You can, I think, pay a certain amount of money and then you can view it. And that also, you know, there's contention whether you can do that or not. I believe Transparency International had wanted to view the Prime Minister's asset and liability declaration, and still they have not been able to get hold of the asset and liability declaration. What we need to understand for us is that there's a general perception that, you know, Sri Lanka is a corrupt country. And with corruption, there's all sorts of corruption. You have systematic corruption, you have grand corruption, and then you have political corruption. And out of all this corruption, the most dangerous type of corruption is political corruption. And also that our politicians have enjoyed impunity, I think, since 1948. If you look at the number of politicians, number of world leaders who have actually been jailed on corruption charges during the last 3 years, maybe 15 to 20 world leaders have been jailed from countries ranging from South Africa, Peru, Iceland, all over. And even
South Korea has 4 presidents jailed.
Park, was jailed for 24 years.
That's right.
Even you know, in Pakistan and, you know, in this part of the world, but in Sri Lanka, we just don't see that. We see a lot of impunity when it comes to politicians. So one way, the way I thought about it was that, you know, if I declare my assets and if the rest of the MPs also declare their assets, then the public are free to see whether there is an extraordinary change in accumulation of wealth in future years.
And that's it. You've put your finger on the right button here. One declaration isn't good enough. What the people, for full transparency, what the people would want to know would be what your declaration was at the time you enter Parliament, and then periodic reviews thereafter. So that gives you a pretty good idea as to how your own assets or your liabilities went down once you're in Parliament.
Absolutely.
So that's, do you think that you and your 6 other colleagues who made this public, do you think they will set a trend? Do you think the others will now follow suit?
I hope so. I think, you know, a few MPs have expressed their willingness to declare their assets. But we also must understand, in order to be fair to the other MPs, how this went about.
Yeah.
The particular declaration of assets I had discussed with Asok Obesekara maybe 3 or 4 years back.
Yeah.
And then I had declared my intention, if they want to come up with a group of MPs who wants to declare their assets, I'm willing to do that. So after about 3 years, the Transparency International came and said that they have about, they had 5 MPs who wants to declare their assets. So I don't think the Transparency International wrote to the general secretaries of parties and said that they are going to, there's this process of where they're trying to publicize the assets of the 225 MPs. So it doesn't mean that although some MPs have not declared their assets, they are crooks or they are thieves or anything to that effect. So and there wasn't a general limitation to all the 225 MPs.
Yeah.
So I think that's why on these 5 MPs took a lead and then decided to join with Transparency.
Oh, I see. Okay, so not everybody was invited.
Well, I think now after the 5 MPs have declared it, Transparency International made a public declaration inviting others to come forth and declare their assets. But initially it was not the case.
We had some members who've been on our program. One of who told me that he had some reservations about making it public, not because he's accumulated so much of wealth or not, but because he felt it was a privacy issue. Even though one is in public life and elected by the public, that elected representative has a right to a certain amount of privacy. How far would you agree with that?
Well, I would agree with it strongly, but I don't think, the situation in Sri Lanka is that if you look at the accumulation of wealth by certain politicians, it's always the case, the case has been they have accumulated wealth while they're in power, or they have accumulated wealth while the government had been in power. So, these politicians have a fiduciary duty towards the people they represent.
Yeah.
So, if you have to weigh your own, privacy, and then if you have to weigh on the other side your fiduciary duties towards your people and your country, I think that.
Decide with the scales tip.
I think you certainly need to pick your responsibilities to your country and the people over your privacy.
Yes, because at the end of the day, nobody forces you to come into power to seek election.
Yeah.
And you can make a conscious choice to not seek election and keep your privacy intact.
Absolutely. I think, for example, according to the French system, they are very careful in keeping the politicians' the privacies.
Yeah.
And I think the most French presidents have a mistress, and the French press doesn't talk about their personal lives.
Yeah.
I think things such as that is okay to keep it private, whatever your personal lives.
Yes.
But when it comes to monetary matters, when it comes to accumulation of wealth, I don't think it should be kept private at all.
No.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. They've been quite open about this, and I'm sure your electorate will be keen to know. I'm sure the press will pick up, and they've already picked it up, because obviously what y'all did is trailblazing. Now then, having said that, did you're quite young, and you're not as old as some of the senior people. Did you pick the party of your choice, the SNFP? Did you pick it because you believe ideologically in it, or did you pick it because you have a family history of supporting this party?
I think mainly it was due to the family history.
Yeah.
My grandfather has been a member of parliament from 60 to 65 and from 70 to 77. My father got into politics in 77 and then he was a member of parliament since 89. So for me in Sri Lanka to get into politics, it's not an easy thing. You need to have, either you need to have money or lots of it, or you need to have fame, or you need to have some sort of a popular name where if you come from a political family,
yeah.
Then your name is publicized in that area, so then you have a better chance of getting into it.
Because that's the way, the nature of politics, yeah.
That's pretty much, especially pertaining to with the change of system into a PR system.
Right.
It becomes very difficult for a person a new entrant to get into parliament.
Do you support the PR system?
No, I oppose it.
You prefer first past the post?
Yes. Or first past the post, maybe a mixed system. I think, principally, I'm agreeable.
What don't you like about the PR system?
Well, the cost of elections, for one thing. So it restricts certain people from coming into politics. And if you look at what an average member of parliament spend on an election, I think, in Sri Lanka.
What do you think you spent?
I probably spent about, I don't know, 15 to 20 million, I would say.
So it's an expensive business.
It's a very expensive business.
It's capital intensive.
Yes. Now, I'll tell you why I oppose the PR system is because I think the cost of elections in Sri Lanka is more expensive than England or in any of the Western European countries.
Yeah.
So people have been talking about campaign finance, for example. So my contention was that before we talk about campaign finance, we need to actually reduce the cost of an election.
Right.
Then we can talk about campaign finance. Now the issue of permits. Now the members of parliament are given duty-free permits when they get elected to parliament.
Yeah.
And I, of course, sold my permit because there was nothing legal about it. But that's the only way I can recover the amount of money which I have spent for elections.
Because you're being so open about it, can I ask you, when you sold your permit, are you liable to
no, you're not.
Pay taxes,
No,
income tax?
No, you're not.
No.
I checked it with the tax department.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
All right, okay. Yeah. So that's because when Parliament gives you that duty-free permit, it covers all that.
Yeah, any permit. I think even the doctors and the.
Oh, it's not just your.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're not liable on tax for
that. So I was going to ask you about campaign finance.
Yeah.
How necessary is laws to control, or to not control, but to have a record of campaign finance?
As I mentioned, it's a question of putting a cart before the horse situation. I think before campaign finance, you need to really change the election system, so the cost of elections.
How do you change that? By making sure that the candidate doesn't have to go to a huge area to campaign?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you an example. My grandfather was a school principal.
Yeah.
He has made a name for himself doing local politics. He was the mayor of Kegot.
Right.
And then he was a very honest man, and then he got into politics.
Right.
Now, if let's take a school teacher, for example,
Yeah.
how many school teachers can contest a general election and win?
That's food for thought.
And in today's context, let's say if you have a first past the post system, if you have one vehicle, then you can pretty much go to all over your electorate, and then meet the people, have meetings, and then you probably you can spend less than $1 million rupees.
Right.
Yeah. And have a fighting chance of getting elected. But with a PR system, especially with the district system, I think no point of talking about campaign finance, because if a candidate has to spend about I spent the amount which I spent was quite a small amount, but let's say I know other candidates spend about 50, 100 million during a general election.
Would it be fair to say that the fastest way to become a millionaire in politics would be to start off as a billionaire and then go for an election? Because by the time you finish, you'd become a millionaire, you'd lose your billionaire status. Would that be right to say it's expensive business?
Well, if people do it honestly, yes. But if you start off as a billionaire and then you get elected, maybe you become a millionaire through that process. But within the next 5 years, if your intention is to accumulate more wealth, then you become a multi-billionaire or something.
Okay. Well, but where's the end of the tunnel then? What can we do? You come from a party where the popular leader is Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa. And serious allegations, sustained allegations over at least 5 years now, because a year before the election and then 4 years. It's relentless. I think the word sustained is wrong. Relentless allegations of corruption. And in fact, that was the theme that was used by the good governance advocates to come into power. But having now secured power, we find an almost lack of any legal action. And then that lack of action is used by, they're supposed to say, well, look, they must be clean because no legal action. Then the other side say, I don't know what they're doing, they're in power now and they haven't done anything. Then there's another set of people who said, you know what, all these guys are the same. How happy are you remaining in a party where the leadership are being accused of being corrupt?
Well, leaderships in all parties are accused of corruption, including the Prime Minister, who's
They say he's the mastermind.
Mastermind, and there was a huge collusion pertaining to the central bank. And even including the JVP leaders, there were accusations of certain monies being given in toilets and all those things. So we joined a party not because of, not entirely based on the leader's track record on whether he's corrupt or not, because there's no foreseeable evidence which we can go through and see whether he's clean or not. We also go through what's in the papers, but we join a party because of the certain policies which we can identify with that party. But I think in order to answer your question, what we can do about corruption is, first of all, you need to have political will in order to get rid of corruption. And second, you need to get rid of the impunity. It's only in Sri Lanka, as I said, that now the classic example is the bond scheme, where there was collusion from right at the top, and then you stole from the country, and then you think you can get away with that, and that's why you stole. If you know that you're going to get punished, then you're not going to steal. So I think that impunity has to be taken out. Then also you need to identify the different types of corruption. Then you have this systematic corruption where if you go to where we have heard stories, if you go to the harbor or if you go to customs, where you need to pay each and every individual. So I think in certain cases that if you introduce technology and there's no direct interface between the service provider and the user, in such situations, I think the corruption can be reduced. Countries such as Georgia and then also the Baltic countries, they have been very successful in using technology to reduce corruption. So I think I think in Sri Lanka also you can do that. And then you have petty corruption. And in order to get rid of things such as petty corruption, you need to have economic development, because we need to understand that you can't fight corruption on an empty stomach. If your kids are starving, and then if you have no means of feeding them because you don't have a job, because the economy is doing bad, or whatever the reason, then you have to do what you have to do in order to feed your kids.
Yeah.
So then there's no point of preaching a corrupt-free society for someone who can't feed his kids. Yeah.
One of our viewers is asking you, first of all, they're thanking you for being so honest. And one of them says, we need people like him to inform the public candidly what is rotten in Sri Lankan politics. Thank you for that comment. Another person says, Member of Parliament Tharaka is coming out well. Please tell him that. I'm telling you that.
Thank you.
Another one is asking you, please ask Mr. Tharaka what changed in Sri Lankan politics between the time of his grandfather and now.
I mean, I wouldn't know, because it's what I read about my grandfather's
No,
time.
but if you're saying there was no corruption then, there's probably no corruption then at the time anyway.
Yeah.
But there is now. What changed? What do you think changed?
I think to a large degree the electoral system also has to take the blame for it. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Thank you very much. The questions are all coming in, taken fast, and I better take this one here. How come all these poor people are being charged and all the big wigs are getting away? That's an important question.
That's exactly what my point was. What I'm saying is the rich and the powerful, there's impunity for the rich. Not only with corruption, I think the general perception is, which is not a very good thing. We heard stories that a young girl who wants to go to an exam in Anuradhapura, that she has stolen 8 mangoes and then she was jailed for some time.
Yeah.
And then you see instances like the bond scam, and then none of them being taken to task.
Yeah.
So I think there is which can build a general feeling of injustice taking place in the country, and that's not a very good thing, because whenever people feel there's law is not equal, or let's say certain people have an advantage when it comes to bending the rules or bending the law in their favor. Whenever that happens, I think things can erupt in a more violent way in future.
Now then, a lot of people commenting about your comment about if you're hungry, your children are hungry, you do just about anything to get them fed, watered and fed. Thank you for your questions. Please keep sending them in. 0772 300 305, coming up on your screen right now. 0772 300 305. Now then, Tharaka, where do you think, are we going in the right direction?
We are going in somewhat of a right direction, but I see that we don't have a huge focus on it. If you look at the budget, for example, this year, there's really no focus on the budget. There's some fancy words, which the Honorable Minister is very good at, portraying that this budget will do wonders to the Sri Lanka. What I really believe is that all the government and the opposition should get together and focus on 4 or 5 key areas of key growth areas, and in those key growth areas, there shouldn't be policy changes for 5 or 10 years. Now let's take, for example, tourism. We have 4.4 billion, I think last year 4.4 billion receipts in tourism. Now I think in 2025 we have the most amount of debt which is going out.
Yeah.
So in order to overcome that amount of money which is going out in 2025, if we can increase our tourism by about 1.2 million, at least we can offset that, and our balance of payment will be somewhat better. So, and other areas, let's take for example areas such as the IT industry.
Yes.
We were $100 million industry maybe 5-10 years back, and now we are $1 billion industry. So what's stopping us from making it a $10 billion industry? Then if you look at areas such as, I always have spoken about this because I have interest in, because in K-Gold district also you get things such as graphite. We have the best quality graphite in the world, and not a single pencil is even produced in Sri Lanka. Even the pencils which we use, it's produced in China and it's brought to Sri Lanka. Yeah, but more than that, okay, a kilo of graphite goes in international markets for about $3. Now since all the vehicles are moving to electric vehicles, the batteries which are used in the electric vehicles are made out of graphene. A kilo of graphene goes for about $10,000. So what's our next step of adding value to graphite in Sri Lanka? Are we thinking about income generating mechanisms to make, if we have to pay our debt, we need to get money. But what I see lacking in the budget is I don't see proper emphasis on certain key areas of income generation.
Indeed. I was going to actually, but we've taken so long because it is rare that we get people who speak openly and candidly without any of the BS that we usually get. And I was going to ask you about this budget because on the one hand, we have got almost no dollars of our own in reserves. And on the other side, we have a budget and I can't see anything that encourages exports. Dollars are not just got only by borrowing money and filling your reserves up. That seems to be counterproductive. And where are our leaders going along in the style of President Park, the original Mr. Park from South Korea, who went from town to town, excepting now they're called cities because they have evolved into cities, and explained to the people of his country that whatever they produce, and they must produce it to international standards because we need to export, and then the quality of our lives, all our lives, will change. That's what they did there, from one of the poorest countries in the region to the 4th largest economy, I think, in the world, certainly in this region. That's why can't our people do that?
Well, they had a more political will than a focus. But if you look at what General Park did in 1970s in Korea, it was a top-down approach where he found these industrialist families and he said, okay, now you produce this, I'm going to support you. A bit similar to what Mr. Premadas did. And then he went and gave them the loans and whatnot, and then gave all the support for them to start the industries. And in a way, it was a bit of a export substitution mechanism.
Well, Mr. Premadas will long be remembered, apart from his world standard, world award-winning program of housing. He'll be long remembered for those factories.
Yes. But I think from an export substitution economy, what South Africa created in 1970s, we are more of an import substitution economy. Whatever the imports we bring, since if our people can't afford it, then the government substitutes the imports. So I think export substitution is of course illegal, but we need to find mechanisms to encourage our exports through at least indirect export substitution mechanisms.
And do you see, how do you analyze the political scene that's about to evolve over the next 9 months?
I don't think much will happen during the next nine months.
What will happen at the end of 1 year from now? What do you think will be?
Come October, we'll go for a presidential election, and then a new president will be in office.
Right.
And soon after the presidential election, whatever the winning party will go for general elections come February. I think the 4.5 years goes ends in February. So maybe after February they'll go for an election, and then after that, whatever the winning party will go for the provincial council elections also.
I have to ask you this, at the risk of being told off by some people. I have to ask you this: do you think the central bank bond scam will? No, rephrase it. How adversely will the central bank bond scam impact on the United National Party?
Well, it has impacted adversely. I think, during the last local council elections, because the bond scam has impacted the economy adversely.
Absolutely.
There was at least about a 2.5% to 3% rate increase in interest rates due to the bond scam. So, I think the bond scam and coupled with their economic policies which are detrimental to the country, which UNP has been following, where they are trying to open up everything, has been detrimental to the country. And I think it was due to that for the first time in Sri Lankan political history, they lost a local council election.
As citizen Balasuriya, does it make you sad that the Presidential Commission of Inquiry have actually put a value and asked for a forensic audit, which is still not ready, but they say that the EPF suffered a loss of more than 8,500 million rupees. If you invest that money, it's 2.5 million every day. If you take them to court and get a conviction, they'll have to pay twice that amount. At 17 billion, Sajid Premadasa will welcome the 5 million rupees interest earned every day. That's not all, Tharaka. If you notice that the central bank announced somewhat proudly that they had raised 2.4 billion US dollars, 2,400 million US dollars on international sovereign bonds.
8%, 7%.
Between 6.9% and 7.9%. Yeah. But Minister Mangala Samaravira is trying to say that this 3% increase is because of the Rajapaksa administration. But isn't it true that that increase in interest rates, the trend was created by none other than Arjuna Mahendran and Ranil Wickremesinghe, because one insisted that they change the system and the other implemented that. And they set the trend. When the trend was, at the time, was 9.8%, they gave away, because they changed the system, they went away, got rid of the average, the weighted average.
From 6.5 to 5%.
They went to 12.5%.
Yeah.
His son-in-law's company offered, when 1 billion was advertised, his son-in-law's company, along with the Bank of Ceylon, acting in cahoots with him as a proxy, they bid for 15 billion, 1,500% more. Isn't that the reason today that the international market is looking at our requirement for dollars and thinking, well, those guys, for no reason, they gave a bond at about 3% more, so why not charge them what we want? Because they'll give it to us, and that's what's happened. Isn't that?
Absolutely. I think also it's just not a question of stealing for us. Let's say now you working at Newsfirst. If you want to steal something from over here, you make a conscious decision on your own to steal some money or something. Now that's different. This is collusion.
This is collusion.
And this is, now if you want to steal something from over here, then if you get hold of the MD and the accountant, and then if you get hold
That's
of,
collusion.
yeah, if you get hold of all the people, and all of you all, go out and then plan and then say that we are going to steal this amount of money, that's collusion. And this collusion, comes all the way to the top of the government, which is who's the Prime Minister and the central bank governor.
The finance minister said yesterday that the most corrupt central bank head was Ajit Cabral. What he says, that Arjuna Mahendran was the best, really. I'd like us to take a national referendum on that. Arjuna Mahendran, the best? Well, I don't think so. The facts don't back that up. Tharaka Faraz, do you know, I've had the most enjoyable half an hour after a very long time. And I think our viewers too. Thank you ever so much. Please come on our channel. We wish you all the very best on behalf of our group, our network, our team, Team News First. We wish you all the very best because we need more people like you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that's the way it was on Newsline. Take care, have a great day ahead, and God bless.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.